I spent more than 70 hours playing the First Berserker Khazan, but how does it compare to the other Souls-likes? I'll break down the entire game and give you my thoughts, so sit back and enjoy the review. This review will be spoiler free, and I played the game on standard difficulty with no summons. With that out of the way, let's explore the game's story. The game's narrative is based on Khazan, a general who defeated the great dragon Hismar. Because of this courageous act, Khazan is classed as a hero throughout the lands. That is until he's accused of being a traitor and imprisoned. Whilst being transported, he breaks free and seeks revenge on the people that labelled him a traitor. As with any Souls-like, the two most important gauges on the screen are your health and stamina. Stamina is consumed when using any offensive or defensive action, so you'll have to manage them accordingly. Khazan has access to three forms of basic attacks. These include swift, potent blows and a charged variant. Now you can think of these as a light, medium and a heavy attack. You can block enemy attacks by guarding, or if guarding just before an enemy makes contact, you'll perform a brink guard. This reduces the enemy's stamina bar as well as reducing Khazan slightly. Now Khazan can also dodge an enemy's attack, which gives you some iframes, but you can also perform a brink dodge which gives you even more distance. Some enemy stances can only be broken with potent blows, and you can think of their stance as poise. This will help with lowering a shield for example and allow you to stagger them. One of the most important mechanics in the game is depleting enemy stamina. This results in them being wide open for a brutal attack which takes a massive chunk of their health bar. They'll get a red circle around them and will be exhausted for a few seconds, so you'll have to act quick. Now for most enemies in the game, this is how you'll be doing your damage. When Khazan's stamina is depleted, he will also be exhausted for a few seconds. And trust me guys, you don't want this as you won't be able to move at all. You can get away with being exhausted when fighting trash mobs, but against elites you'll be sent back to the bonfire. Sorry, I meant the Blade Nexus. And whilst we're on the topic, the Blade Nexus is this game's version of a bonfire. These are checkpoints scattered throughout each mission where you'll respawn at when you die. These are spread out pretty well, so on the occasion that you do die, which will be a lot by the way, the backtracking won't be anything too crazy. Now when enemies die they drop lacrima, which is the currency needed to level up. If you die, your lacrima will be on the ground where you perished, so you'll need to go and pick it back up. If you die before picking it up or leave the level, your souls will be gone forever. You start off with 3 healing charges referred to as Netherworld energy. You'll find more of these as you play the game, but don't expect to find too many. Some of them are hidden pretty well, so make sure to keep an eye out. You'll quickly learn that if Khazan has a certain move, then enemies have an equivalent version. Remember Khazan's brutal attacks, well enemies can perform a burst attack. These cannot be blocked, so you must dodge or counter-attack them, and I didn't even mention the counter-attack mechanic. Now counter-attacking will not only repel their attack, but they'll take even more damage and restore your stamina. I found the counter-attack timing window to be pretty generous, and you'll want to nail this every single time. Now most enemies and bosses are stunned for a second after a counter-attack, which will be a major source of getting damage in. The controls on the First Berserker are fantastic, with the game queuing your next input. You can start queuing your next move pretty much instantly, which translates into some of the most responsive controls I've experienced in a Souls-like. The brink guard timing and dodges are very precise, and you won't be able to spam your way out of attacks, but they are consistent. If you get the timing of an enemy's attack down, you can make quick work of them. If we're going to talk about queuing inputs, then it would be rude not to discuss the filth that you can pull off with Khazan. Most combos are just a mix of swift and potent attacks, and they aren't too difficult to pull off. You can pull off strings that even a Kuma would be proud of. Now the longer strings require good stamina management and paying attention to the enemy's movements, as if they fall out of stagger and you commit to an extra attack, you will be punished. When I first started playing, I wasn't sure if dodging or guarding was more effective, and whilst you can stick to one or the other throughout the game, I highly recommend utilising both. We've touched on the game's combat, but what about the game world as well as the locations that you'll be travelling to? Oh, and don't worry guys, we've still got enemies and bosses to explore later in the video. Khazan is played in a mission format where you'll be able to explore and fight your way through them. Now each level is quite big, but they are relatively linear, and apart from a branching path or two, there's only one way to go. Every level ends in a boss fight followed by you being taken to the hub world known as the Crevice. The Crevice houses all of the NPCs that you'll encounter throughout your journey, as well as spectral portals. Spectral portals allow you to travel to a certain region and give you a map view of missions that can be selected. Now the actual locations you'll be visiting look great. You've got Al-Ravaka, which starts as a ruined village with a hue of dull greens and greys. After a bit of platforming, you'll find yourself in an underground facility. Now here you'll find some strange floating fish, where the bigger one eats the smaller ones to regen health. Strange, but that's nature I guess. There are bandit camps where you'll see corpses hanging around, pardon the pun, and a few patiently taking a seat. This level has the trademark guard that alerts all the other enemies to your presence, resulting in you getting swarmed. Some prisoners will be alive and literally shaking in their boots. Oh, and I killed the snitch by the way. There's also some very light like puzzle sections in an underground lab. Now these are simple to work out, but their inclusion in a Souls-like is fresh and something we don't see too often. The laser beams that you can turn off also tag enemies, but it wouldn't be right if they couldn't hurt you too. Overall, the game world looks great and there are so many different places to visit, they all look unique and add to the immersion. There are bonus and side missions obtained from natural progression or by talking to NPCs. Now these are completely optional, but you're going to want to do them anyways for the lacrima as well as the gear drops. I did find these quite enjoyable at the beginning, but I did notice a pattern the further into the game that I got. All of the side missions use the same story level maps, which have been trimmed down to be smaller and put in reverse, like the missions in the Neo games. The end boss is typically a reskinned story boss or an elite enemy of even more health. Now whilst I don't mind this as they're optional, these can drag towards the end of the game because you've already experienced the content. And what would a Souls-like be without shortcuts? Whilst these are self-explanatory, these are a staple of the genre, and whilst most of them are obvious to see, a few of them blend well into the background, so make sure to keep an eye out. There's illusory walls throughout the world, and you may be wondering how I knew that one was there. Well, I could hear a noise and decided to hit it. And check this one out, the game must think I'm a noob, putting a fancy out in between me and a pressure activated tile trap. I've put my time into this genre, so you'll have to trick another scrub. 15 minutes later I became the noob as I fell for this one, and this one, and this one again. Khazan has access to dual-wield axes, a greatsword and a spear. The dual wields allow for quick hitting flurries and good mobility. The greatsword hits hard and is good at reflecting damage, and the spear provides a flexible moveset as well as the range. You can swap these out at any time, but I stuck to the spear throughout my playthrough. The gear set system that Khazan offers was fantastic and allows players to tailor builds to their playstyle. You see, each piece of gear that's part of the same set will give you a stat bonus. You can mix and match different sets to give you certain stats or abilities that will help you in combat. Certain pieces of armor are heavier, which will affect your agility, which is ranked from A to C. Now in my experience, this affected how much stamina is consumed when you perform an action. I played the first half of the game with an A rating, which is the lightest you can be and depletes the least amount of stamina, but I eventually found the Deep Shadow set, which is one of the best in the game, but that gave me a C rating. As an example, the Deep Shadow set boosted the attacks of my spear considerably, penetrated enemies' guards, and buffed one of your best abilities in After Image Thrust. Now there are so many gear sets in a game, with more being unlocked the further that I played. If you like min-maxing and looking for builds that do the most damage, you will absolutely love this feature. You can have the best gear in the game, but if you don't have the stats to utilise it, you won't get far in the First Berserker. The lacrima gained from killing enemies is used to level up Khazan's stats at a Blade Nexus. There are 5 stats that can be leveled up, 2 relate to your health and stamina, and the other 3 affect the scaling of your weapon damage. These consist of strength, willpower and proficiency. If you're using the dual wields, you want to level willpower, greatsword users will want to level strength, and fellow spear users will opt for proficiency. Don't make the same mistake I did and spend the first few hours leveling up strength, only to use a spear which provides no increase in damage. If you do manage to fuck this up, you can use a regression orb to reset your stats, and there's pretty much an infinite supply of these. This means you can switch up your playstyle if you get bored or if you're struggling with certain enemies. 30 is the first soft cap, so I recommend getting your vitality, endurance and weapon stat to this number first, as you'll get a slightly better return for your lacrima. For those that are curious, I beat the game with 60 vitality, 40 endurance and 81 proficiency. I focused on getting as much damage in as possible, but just see what works for you. Also, if you are playing the game or have completed it, let me know your stat builds. You can also upgrade a few stats via Khazan's memories. These provide small buffs to your stamina damage, regular damage as well as your damage multiplier. There are also phantom abilities that provide further buffs to your stamina, ranged attacks as well as your health recovery. I used Kestra for the entire game, who gives a passive buff to your stamina recovery as well as restoring stamina when an enemy is exhausted. Overall, there's quite a few stats that you can level up, but the most important is your health, stamina and weapon stat. The others are just nice to have, and these aren't overwhelming by the way, as you'll be spending most of your time in missions. Now we've touched on the basics of combat, but what about Khazan's special moves? There's a skill point system that allows you to unlock a variety of moves as well as spirit moves. Now spirit moves use tokens, which are represented by yellow circles on the bottom half of the screen. These are some of the most powerful abilities you have access to, so use them as much as possible. You'll start off with a javelin, which gives you a ranged attack and can target an enemy's weak spot to do even more damage, like you can see right here. If you unlock a skill and don't like it, you can unselect it and get your skill point back. This was incredibly handy, as I changed my skills frequently depending on what boss I was fighting. You can bind up to 6 spirit moves used to button inputs, and whilst I've seen others pull off some incredible combos, I only ever used 3 at a time, but only used 1 for the most of the game. The skill point system is only as good as the skills and abilities you can unlock, and they were all viable, but more importantly, fun to use. So now that you're familiar with Khazan's moves and abilities, let's talk about the game's enemies and what you can expect. There are 7 categories of enemies, including humans, beasts, and dragonkin, to name a few. Within each category, you'll see upwards of 10 variants, and let's use the humans for example. There are mages, knights, as well as marksmen, and as the name suggests, they all have different abilities. The undead have an ability that lets them respawn, and they can keep doing so until you destroy the purple glow they leave on the ground. But the undead are nothing compared to the elites. These are some of the toughest forms of regular enemies, and serve the purpose of a mini-boss. They have lots of health, lots of stamina, and do lots of damage. But unlike the regular trash mobs, they don't respawn when you kill them after resetting at a blade nexus. The other killer in this game, apart from the bosses, which we'll get to shortly, are status afflictions. There are so many status afflictions in this game, and let's be honest, they're annoying. You'll have to deal with being burned, which does chip damage, being shocked, which messes up your stamina recovery, poisoned, which is self-explanatory, and even hallucinating, which inverts your controls. And get this, that's only half of them. Eventually, every single enemy can hit you with some form of status. Now, the game provides you with plenty of consumables to get rid of them, which is the only silver lining. I've got a rule in Souls-likes where I'll kill every single enemy once. If I happen to die, well, GG's, but I'm running past you the next time. As far as I'm concerned, I've killed you already, and I don't want to keep fighting trash mobs over and over again. But in the First Berserker, enemies refuse to de-aggro, and they'll just keep following you. I'd be lying if I said this didn't annoy me, as I often had to clear out a whole path again to be able to progress. They'll interrupt you from climbing up ladders and even follow you up. Now, I know I'm the tough hero Khazan, but I considered this a form of harassment. It's similar to when a failed Tinder date decides to jump back in the DMs, even though you made it clear you're not interested. But fear not, lads, there are some alternate ways to deal with these pests. You could push them off an edge, use the environment to your advantage, bait them into purple lasers, and last but not least, use the high ground to your advantage like Obi-Wan. Now, I want to make it clear that I did not cheese this enemy or any others in this game. I merely used tactics that gave me an advantage on the battlefield. Now, I'll be honest, the regular enemies as well as elites aren't going to give you a hard time. There are some instances where you'll get caught off guard or overwhelmed, but you've got the tools to deal with these guys. But the bosses, on the other hand, well, let's get into it. The First Berserker Khazan is one of the hardest Souls-likes I've ever played, and lads, I've played and owned them all. Bloodborne, Dark Souls 1 to 3, Neo 1 and 2, and the list goes on. I've completed all of these games with no summons, but some of the bosses on Khazan, they even put Millennia to shame. Now, I'm not going to show any of the later bosses, as this will be spoiler free, but with my e-bragging out of the way, let's dive into the bosses. They will either have a grey or a purple stamina bar, but what does that mean? Well, grey health bars are for humanoid bosses, and they can refill when not performing any actions. Non-humanoids have purple stamina bars that deplete when you attack them, as well as brink guarding, and these do not replenish. Your goal with bosses is simple to understand, but hard to execute. Deplete their stamina bar, perform a brutal attack, and then repeat the process until they're dead. This is considerably easier to do with non-humanoids because their stamina bars don't refill, and you can be patient and just wait for openings. You have to be quite aggressive with humanoids because the moment you see their stamina get low, you must go in and try to exhaust them. Now, the first boss Yatuga was easy, but you should expect this as the game's just started. So is the second boss, but I won't show this guy for the sake of spoilers. But the third boss, Viper, he had me second guessing if I was the same guy that took down the Nameless King, had an epic battle with Millennia, and slayed Ishin the Sword Saint. When I finally took him down after 20 attempts, I was in disbelief when I saw him transform and the second phase begin. After several more attempts, I finally took him down and knew the game was only going to get harder. But before we move on, we do have to discuss the summon feature. Yes, you can summon phantoms to help you in battle. Now, I only summoned once just to see how useful the AI was. I was always going to let myself die to the boss, but for review purposes, I checked them out. I'll make this quick. They're useless and they get destroyed. I noticed the phantom on the other side of the battlefield, and the Viper destroyed him as it didn't even have much health. I can't really comment on their efficacy throughout the game, as I didn't use them, but don't expect too much help from them either. That same Viper boss casually comes back as a regular enemy, which made me realise that he wasn't that tough to begin with. But when you get to the mid-game, every single boss fight is difficult. They all have status effects, they all hit hard, and the humanoids can dodge your attacks with ease. One boss, again who I won't show for spoiler purposes, took me over 50 attempts. This individual inflicts you with chaos, which reduces your max health like Curse in Dark Souls. They can teleport and you have a split second to react, and if you don't, you're going back to the bonfire. Be prepared to fight bosses 20, 30, hell even 40 times just to take them down. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I breezed past all of them because that didn't happen. Some are frustrating, some are a good challenge, and the rest are somewhere in between. Now look guys, 99% of the time I'm a pretty chill guy and I'm in a good mood, but that changed quick with some of the bosses in the second half of the game. If I had a swear jar for the time playing Khazan, I could pay for a family holiday and fly first class. Well, I could fly first class anyways, as I don't have a family. There were a handful of occasions when I just thought, fuck it, I'm gonna summon. A few seconds later I'd remind myself, bro, we're not doing that, go back and practice, stop crying and get good. The aspect that disappointed me the most wasn't even the bosses, it was a trophy that I missed out on. There's a trophy for beating the game without summoning. Even if you summon and let yourself die to the boss, you get locked out from the trophy. Even though I knew this, I still had faith that it would pop in the final credits, and I shouldn't have been surprised when it didn't. So guys, don't make the same mistake I did. If you do want to go for all the trophies, make sure that you do not summon at all. Oh, and whilst we're on the subject guys, play the game however the hell you want and in a way that you enjoy. Summons or no summons, normal or easy mode, who cares? The most important thing is that you enjoy the challenge of the game. The devs introduced these features for people to use them. There's only so many times a boss can kill you before you start remembering their moveset. The First Berserker is one of the harder Souls-likes, but with practice you will persevere. There's far more to the game than just bosses though, like the NPCs you'll find in the crevice. There's a few vendors here and they have some great utilities, so let's take a look at what you can expect. You've got the blacksmith who can craft gear sets. Now he's got a few by default, but you'll have to bring him new scrolls to forge new ones. Oksana can exchange gear for lacrima, which you'll want to do as enemies drop so much gear. After a few missions your inventory will be full, so you may as well exchange it. She can also change random attributes on your gear if you're looking for a certain role, as well as augment your gear. Augmenting lets you increase your lower level gear by giving her a higher level piece of equipment. This is handy if you've got a god roll piece of loot and you don't want to swap it out. The only other noteworthy person you want to talk to is Danjin. This strange character wears a jar on his head and was clearly inspired by the living jars from Elden Ring. If you give him jars that are hidden throughout the game, he'll sell you his jar helmets, and to my knowledge he sells some of the best helmets in the game, and I would know as I have one of them. Yes, an animated love heart jar that pulses love hearts. Not my style exactly, but I did like its bonuses. You've also got the option to enter the training grounds where you can fight specific enemies, and a great way to practice against them. There's also bonus rewards for killing them in a certain way. In terms of visuals, the game looks fantastic. I'm a fan of the 3D cel-shaded graphics, and it's something new for a Souls-like. It's also worth noting that the game runs flawlessly at 60 frames per second. The First Berserker is fully voice acted, of which the VAs did a great job, and kudos to the artists that did work on the music. The game makes use of the DualSense controller's audio, as you'll hear certain voice lines exclusively from the controller. With all of that said, it's time to give you my final thoughts and conclude the review. The First Berserker Khazan is a long game, with PlayStation claiming I've played for 84 hours. Now this is all going to depend on if you complete the side missions, bonus missions, and your skill at the game in general. In my opinion, you're looking at over 50 hours of gameplay minimum. Now I paid £40 or $50 for my copy of the game, and I'm very happy with the price point, and believe me when I say you get a lot of game for not a lot of money. This along with Ender Magnolia is one of my favourite games I've played in 2025. The combat, the bosses, the game world are all pieces of a great puzzle. There are multiple game endings, and you've also got New Game Plus for some replayability factor. As of writing, only 5.6% of people have beaten the game, and only 3.7% of people have completed it on normal difficulty. I've said it before, but I need to reiterate, this is a difficult game. I thought I was going to steamroll Khazan because of all the other Souls-likes I've played, and I was humbled. We've established that I enjoyed the game, but what did the critics have to say about it? It's got a score of 81 on OpenCritic, a 79 on Metacritic, and very positive on Steam. I think all of the scores are accurate, but I'd go a little bit higher and give the game an 8.5. The First Berserker Khazan is a great game, but it's not perfect. Some of the enemy placements could be tweaked, some bosses have a bit too much in their arsenal, and there are several reskinned bosses and locations, but that doesn't subtract from how good this game really is. Thank you to all of the beautiful people that stuck around to the end. Your time is much appreciated. If you enjoyed the video, you know what to do as you've heard it all a million times. My next video will be a review of Mandragora Whispers of the Witch Tree. Yes, another Souls-like. So until next time guys, I'll catch you all on the next video.